after you've already drawn the 2 o'clock, the 6 o'clock, and the 10 o'clock cylinder standards, and they are in a place where you know those are the assignments that you're turning in. I used a folder called assignments. I want you to open up the 2 o'clock cylinder standard, and we are going to work on the configurations assignment. We are going to create 2 cylinder standards based off of this one. And it's not a file save as thing and then make changes. That's a cop-out for lazy people. It seems like you're saving time, and as an assignment you might be, but in terms of your actual future job, you are wasting time. Let's say you do that 20 times and someone says, oh, we have a design change, goes across the board on all these. You now have to change 20 part files. If you'd have done it this way, you only have to make 1 change. Okay, this is all about time savings, making you a more effective draftsperson or designer. Design changes are a daily occurrence, so you need to be aware and prepared for them as best you can. And this is one way to do that. We're going to create the 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock based off of this. In order to do that, I am going to click on my configurations manager, which is right up here next to the feature manager. And by default, it says, okay, this is your part. And here is your default configuration. We haven't done anything yet. Just every part looks like this. Okay? This is the default configuration. This is the parent. This is the default. We're going to right click on the parent and we're going to add configuration. And we're going to call that the 6 o'clock. And click OK. Now pay attention to this order. Here is the parent. These are the derivatives. We have the 2 o'clock, which is the default, and we have the 6 o'clock, which we just created. Let's create one more. We'll right click on the parent up here, add configuration. We'll call this the 10 o'clock. And again, all in a row. These are all siblings. None is more higher than the other. The only thing that's different between these 3 is that the 2 o'clock happens to be the default. It's the one that was created automatically. So with the 10 o'clock active, notice that there's a little green check mark next to the active one. You can change these just by double clicking them. I want the 10 o'clock active, however. And we're going to change the 10 o'clock into its part as per the print. Based on the print, there's only one thing different about it, and that is the depth of this shoulder needs to be 200 thousandths deep instead of 360 thousandths deep. Everything else on this part is identical. So the 10 o'clock is active. It's got the green check. I'll go back to my feature manager, and I need to find the feature that I want to change. It's the cut for this shoulder, and it's not a hole. Cut extrude, and you can see that it's highlighted in orange there. I'll right click that feature. I'm going to edit the feature. Now, mine is a little bit different than yours. By default, mine comes up as this configuration because I use configurations and I modified this. Yours is going to be checked as all configurations. You don't want that. This is where configurations screw people up and they give up on them, because by default, SOLIDWORKS says, well, obviously any change you make on this, you want to propagate to every configuration that you have. And that's not true. That's just what SOLIDWORKS thinks you want. You have to tell it what you want. We want to make a change to this configuration only. And the change that we're making is we are changing this 0.36 to 0.2. And we're going to click OK. But before I do that, I'm going to double check and make sure that this configuration is checked. Click OK. So we now have a shoulder that is different than the default. Let's go back to our configuration manager and let's open up that default, that 2 o'clock, and let's see that if that changes. And it does. So we did in fact successfully change that configuration and that configuration only. And we'll verify it by clicking on the 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock is no different than the 2 o'clock because the 6 o'clock up here has not been modified, but we're going to modify it. So go ahead and change that shoulder to 0.03 the same way I just showed you how. So I would go to Features Manager, right click on Cut Extrude, edit the feature, make certain that in my Configurations Manager that this configuration is checked, change the dimension of the shoulder, click OK. So we have changed that shoulder. We still have one other change to do with the 6 o'clock though. The 6 o'clock is longer and it has holes in the bottom. Well, how do I deal with it being longer? In order to make this longer, we have to modify the initial sketch of the initial feature, but only in the 6 o'clock, which is totally doable as long as you pay attention. So we are in the 6 o'clock. Okay. I know it says 2 o'clock cylinder standard, but that's the name of the part. The 6 o'clock right here is the one that's active. And we can verify that by clicking on Configuration Manager and verifying that the green checkbox is on the 6 o'clock. Okay, how do we modify that initial extrude? Well, it's actually very simple. We would just expand it, right click on the sketch, and edit the sketch. Here's the next part where configurations really confound people. Some of you accept and are fine with changing dimensions in this type of dialog box. I don't know why SOLIDWORKS does this, but this is horrible. Never do that. You need to be in the dimension modification dialog box here. Always. Never, ever change a dimension like this. And that's one of the downsides of having multiple options to do things. Doing it one way allows you to do certain things. Doing it another way allows you to do other things. Always use the dimension modified dialog box. And here's why. You're in configurations and you've probably never seen this icon before or paid attention. It's always been there. This is the configurations manager within the dimension dialog box. By default right now, it is this configuration because I've modified this. By default on yours, it would be all configurations. So any change you make to this dimension will change every single part. And this is why people get so frustrated with configurations, is there are two places you have to remember to check. When you're in features, there is a configurations manager at the bottom of your dialog box when modifying that feature. And when you're changing a sketch, there is this configurations manager right here within the dimension modify box, and you have to make sure that it is for this configuration. And if you don't do that, it'll mess all of them up. So if I just change this to 2.85, I verify that this is for this configuration. Click OK. Click OK here for that change of dimension. Exit the sketch. And my 6 o'clock cylinder standard is now longer than the others, and I can tell because of the distance here. So just to verify, let's go back to our configurations manager and double check the default, the 2 o'clock. Well, that's obviously shorter. Let's make sure that our change didn't propagate to the 10 o'clock. And it didn't. The only thing that changed is the shoulder. So we have successfully changed those two shoulders, and we've changed the length to the 6 o'clock only. The only thing that you have left to do is in the 6 o'clock, making sure that that's the active configuration, you need to use Hole Wizard and drill those two holes. That's simple. I'll let you do that on your own. So you are now going to have, for 2 assignments, you're going to turn in 3 parts. I want these turned in at the same time. You're going to turn in the 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock cylinder standards. In the 2 o'clock cylinder standard, you will have the configurations for the 6 and the 10. And then you'll also be turning in the 6 and the 10 just as parts. So again, you will turn in 3 parts, the 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. And then in your 2 o'clock, you will have these configurations identical to how I've done mine. All right, go do it and get that turned in.